When I was about 5 or 6 years old, my sisters and I used to share a room. Most nights, my older sister and I would see two distinct figures. She would see a lady in white standing in the doorway, directly in front of my bed. I would see a man with red eyes, or at least I thought it was a man, as all I could see were red eyes. Though my sister could see the lady, she said she never spoke to her. She just stood there getting closer every night, while I, on the other hand, would see a pair of bright red eyes staring at me from the closet. A disembodied masculine voice would whisper, "JJ, come to the closet and play," over and over. Sometimes my older sister and I would jump in each other's beds and hide under the blankets until morning. This was going on for months until my dad decided to get the house blessed again. We never saw them after that. I'm 24 now. My wife and I recently had a baby. I've been having weird dreams recently. They would always start with me standing in my son's room, staring at the closet, and the familiar set of red eyes would stare back at me. My most recent dream, he actually spoke, his voice a lot deeper and booming than I remember. "You didn't come and play with me, but your son may be the one to play," he said before I woke up. I called my dad and told him about the whole thing. He told me he remembers me telling him about that man years before. But then, just then, he went silent for about 5 minutes. When he spoke again, he recounted seeing the same figure as a child. He also told me he remembered having the same dream after I was born. I've blessed my house twice already, but I can only protect my son so much. I just hope, I really, really hope, that he doesn't go play in the closet. I may never see him again. When I was 16, my class and I took a trip to the MO State Penitentiary in Jefferson City, Missouri. We were traveling as a group from our AP government class, and I was with friends in the old jail. While we were in the old jail, they had us all walk up to the different levels of the building where all the cells were, and they would sound an alarm and have all the cells close and everyone walk down the few flights of stairs. However, when I was walking down the stairs, I slowly felt what I thought felt like 5 separate fingers touch my lower back, almost my butt. My friends were behind me, and we would go around every once in a while and tease each other, so I assumed they were teasing me. So I turned up to look at them and said, "Hey guys, why did you grab me?" And they were a flight and a half above me. There was no way for them to rush down, grab me, and run all the way back up the stairs without making any noise. My other friend was in front of me, and he raised his hand and said, "I didn't do anything." Obviously, he couldn't reach around, and I, to this day, don't know what grabbed me. All I know is for the rest of the time, it felt like someone was watching me, and I couldn't sit in the gas chamber chair, as if something was holding me back. There was no way I was going to be able to sit, and eventually I had to leave early before everyone else because I felt like I was going to vomit. I've tried to explain my situation for years and still have no idea what happened that day. All I know is that a ghost wanted to be really friendly and obviously did not like that gas chamber. I'm not well versed in the paranormal, and these experiences happened years ago. Any insights or explanations would be extremely helpful. It has been difficult to even talk about this. Grew up in a newer house on older farmland that, to my knowledge, had little history. I guess to a certain degree, I always felt something, especially in the basement. It wasn't until my late teenage years, especially changes, new girlfriend, new friends, etc., that I started to notice something. It wasn't until my ex and I broke up that these experiences stopped. A list of things that started to happen. Pennies hitting me, walls, and bedroom door from out of nowhere. I even woke up one morning with a mound of them placed under my stomach while sleeping. Getting scratched or cut in the shower. Always 3 marks. Kitchen cabinets left open. All of them at once to the same degree or angle. Disembodied voices only one time, but I heard a whisper that said, "Burn the house down." Picture frames flying off the wall so they fell face down, or ended up poised in a way that breaks the laws of physics. Shadow people. Multiple witnesses including friends and family. Additionally, I had a sleep paralysis where I was choked by a purple mist. And one night while sleeping, something squeezed my leg until I woke up. When I opened my eyes, it was my father, and he was evilly laughing at me. Turns out he was never in the room. I also had a friend say he saw shadowy figures with red glowing eyes that were perched in trees outside the family home. He also saw them at my family's vacation home in a separate state. I witnessed them as well, but only at the family home. About 8-ish years ago, I lived in a town in the mountains that had a lot of vacant and abandoned houses. I had gone into 2 of them. The first one I went into honestly scared me. It was off a stone road with a few other houses scattered down the road. My boyfriend at the time and I drove there, even though it was less than a mile from where we lived. It had snowed a lot, and there was probably a good 8 inches of snow on that lot. The house was set back from the road and had a very long driveway. The first weird thing was there were appliances, stoves, washers, dryers, refrigerators, just lining the driveway on either side. The house itself was a big house and a split level. Front door, when you go in, you can go up the few steps to the main area or down the few steps to the bottom level. There were no steps to get into the front door, so we went to the side. The door was already kicked in and there was snow blowing to the inside. The house was completely gutted. We went in and there were those really tall Jesus candles you can get from like the dollar store lining the hallway on both sides. It had to be close to 100 in total. And we went up the stairs to the front door, continued up the other steps, and stopped in front of a door a little to the right of the kitchen, which was at the top of the steps. There was heavy plastic, like layers. It was thick, acting as a door so we couldn't see in the room. We decided to go check it out, so we pushed the plastic aside to go in. The room was small, and there was a small folding table set up in the middle of the room with 1 chair, 1 plate on the table, 1 fork, 1 spoon, and 1 cup knocked over. The room's air felt very heavy, as if whoever was there, or there last, was very depressed and sad, and maybe even took their life there, but there were no signs of that. There was no other furniture in the room. There was a closet door that was ajar, but we heard a noise come from behind it. Thinking it was an animal or something, we opened the door and there was a black top hat on a hook and nothing else. I started to get anxiety really bad, and the heaviness of the air was getting to me. We walked out of the room through the heavy plastic, and I stopped at the top of the steps as my ex wanted to go down the hall, but I was getting too creeped out and I told him to hurry up. He was maybe 10 steps down the hall when the plastic from the doorway flew open and I felt this big forceful rush of air go past me and down the steps. It almost knocked me over. My ex heard the plastic move and ran toward me, pretty much picked me up, and we ran down the steps and out the door back to my car. It was terrifying. The plastic could not have moved on its own. The other house I was in was not so scary at all. It was almost comforting. The small house had been vacant for a long time and the roof was collapsing in. We went in through the front door and it was like whoever once lived there just left one day and never came back. I'm assuming it was an elderly person who died and no one came to empty the house. Everything was still there. medicine in the bathroom that expired in 1994, dishes were on the drying rack next to the sink, wallet with ID, dentures, just everything. It was sad. We checked out the home and found tons of cool stuff, especially an old World War I or World War II uniform, an old sewing machine, a record player with tons of records, and this old parchment paper book of records dating back to the 1890s with railroad information and costs of materials and letters between family and friends and business transactions. It was super cool to see that. We didn't take anything, but it was neat to feel like we stepped back in time. I moved out of that area and a couple years ago went to drive by that house, but it's not there anymore. One of my favorite hobbies is photography. So one day, while visiting Virginia for a job I was working at the time, my friend and I decided to go look for some abandoned places to take photographs of, since Halloween was just around the corner. So after some driving around and some quick phone research, we find this 1950s era abandoned insane asylum. We couldn't find a way in, and all the door entrances were locked, boarded off, and guarded by cameras. Finally, we found an old busted window that led to what was once the kitchen. After some quick thinking, we found an old chair and hopped in. The place was super dark, wet and cold, and as soon as I set foot down, I got the chill down my spine, as if something was there, or somebody or something was watching me. My friend, who was a lot less shaken, wanted to go look around. I started snapping pics of things that were broken or flipped over. My friend walks down a hallway with the words, "All who enter die," written on the wall. I didn't follow, but between being spooked and taking the pictures, I just wasn't ready to take that step yet. It wasn't 30 seconds later, my friend comes speeding back in the room looking frightened, but trying to keep himself calm, and said, "All right, I've seen enough. Let's go now." I said, "What happened? Did you see something?" He didn't say a word, but walked past me and started climbing back out the window we came in. I was close to the hallway, and I guess my natural curiosity kicked in, so I leaned over and peeked down the hallway. At the end of the hallway was an empty chair. Something small was in the chair, looked like a ball or something, and the next thing I know, it slid off the chair and landed on the floor. I was totally freaked out. I screamed, "Oh hell no," and ran for the window. My friend was waiting on the other side, so I threw him my camera and I leapfrogged out the window, cutting up my hands in the process, but not really caring about it. We ran back to the car, got in, and sped away. It wasn't until a few minutes and a few miles later, we finally calmed down enough to talk to each other about what had happened. I said, "Did you see that ball in the chair? When I looked down the hallway, I saw something in that chair and then it fell to the floor." My friend looked at me with shock and disbelief in his eyes and said, "It wasn't a ball." I was walking down the hallway peeking into the empty rooms, and it was creepy seeing the flipped over beds and stuff scattered everywhere. But when I got closer to the end of the hallway, what looked like an empty chair had a small doll sitting there. I thought it was spooky, but probably some crackhead put it there, and as soon as I thought that, the doll went from sitting up to laying over, so I ran out of there. I thought I might have overreacted and maybe it was a breeze or something that knocked it over, but once you said it got knocked to the ground, I knew it couldn't have been a breeze, and that totally freaked me out. So yeah, I know it doesn't sound very scary, but you had to have been there. With the combination of cold and chills, and how quiet and secluded it was, it just made it a perfect condition to be scared, more than I ever have been before. My ex-husband and I used to love going into old abandoned houses years ago. There was a beautiful old 2-story brick home about a mile from where we lived. The grass and trees were so grown and tall, it was hard even getting to the house. My ex managed to get a window open, and we climbed through it. It was like a time capsule. Very nice and expensive furniture and stuff everywhere. Furniture was covered with really dusty sheets. Everything looked high quality and expensive. Even the wallpaper was rich. It was creepy how it seemed like they walked away from all of it in the 1950s or 60s. The kitchen was upstairs, which was odd, but we ventured up there, and there was a huge arc opening into a gentleman's type man cave. Again, lots of expensive furniture and stuff. I stood in the archway while my ex rummaged through stuff. Off to the side of the arch was a huge mirror leaning against the wall. I used it to check my hair for spider webs. Took maybe 3 steps away from the mirror to tell my ex I wanted to go. It literally felt like someone was standing beside me. Took the 3 steps back to the mirror, and in bright pink lipstick were the words, "Get out." I swear on my life and the lives of my children, it was right there, and it hadn't been 2 minutes before. The mirror was only a few feet behind me the entire time, and I definitely would have seen "Get out" in bright pink lipstick a minute before. I even remember the exact shade of lipstick too. It was the kind old ladies like to wear. Well, I screamed and jumped back into a kitchen table and fell. My ex comes running over, and I'm so scared I just point to the mirror babbling like an idiot. My ex calmly got me out of there, and we never went back. He thinks I didn't notice it before, but I was all up on that mirror, so I would have absolutely noticed bright pink lipstick in the middle of it. Get cold chills every time I think about it. The current house my family and I live in is fairly new, maybe built in the late 80s, but it's been redone modern and gorgeous. We moved in 3 years ago, but this happened just a year into living there. Me and my brother had already experienced some weird things in the house, but neither of us are paranormal believers or anything, so it was just whatever to both of us. So one night, I'm carrying my toddler sister up the stairs to bring her to the bath. Home alone, just babysitting her. Also, neither me nor my brother had ever brought up the weird orbs of people it looked like we would see behind us in mirrors or in the corner of our eyes, so she would not have known. Anyways, turning the corner when my sister points to the dark corner of the hall and says, "Who's that black guy over there?" I literally froze because I saw it too, but didn't say anything. Right after that is a blur, but I remember telling my sister it was just the darkness. Nobody was there. I still don't buy it. I think it was a trick of the light and such, but it still makes my skin crawl that she saw what I did. She's 3 years old and had no idea that we had already been seeing this stuff. So back when I was in university, I lived in a student accommodation, UK version of dorms. There were 6 rooms and 7 of us. It was my second year, and we were all friends who moved in together. We were there for a year, and while stuff didn't happen too frequently, we were all talking about it in our group chat the other day, and I've decided to do a little chronological list of all the weird stuff that happened that makes me suspect that our flat may have been haunted, which several of my flatmates insisted on daily. Some of these I personally witnessed, others I didn't. So first off was an incident that started from Freshers Week and used to happen most days throughout the course of the year. And that's the motion lights turning on, one by one as if somebody was walking through them. So the hallway was full of motion lights, and they would often flicker and turn on, which we first witnessed while drinking on Freshers Night. Not confirmed activity, could be easily chalked up to an electrical malfunction. The next incident was a few weeks in, when the couple who shared the double room, Kyle and Jenny, mentioned that their shower turned on in the middle of the night. Again, unconfirmed, as it was purely hearsay and also could be explained as a water malfunction. From here is when things start getting weird. We had a girl called Eve over after a night out. She was sleeping on the couch in the living room kitchen area, which was all one place. She didn't have a toilet on hand, so needed to use one of the en-suites for our rooms. She opted to use Kyle and Jenny's room as it was closest to the kitchen. After a nighttime toilet trip, she attempted to get back into the kitchen living room and apparently couldn't push the door open. She pushed against it hard, but couldn't seem to open this door. She said it was moving slightly, but felt like somebody was pushing against it from the other side. After using an insane amount of force, it flew open and she fell down, banging on Kyle and Jenny's door in tears afterwards. I came out while she was crying and explaining what happened, although in all fairness, she was pretty drunk, so there's a potential explanation. One of the weirdest incidents happened a few months in. 3 of us were in the kitchen, myself, Adam, and Josh. I had finished cooking and was sat at the kitchen table eating while watching Josh trying to cook while Adam kept spanking him with a spatula. We were laughing and joking when all of a sudden, a coffee pot on the side just seemingly jumped into the air, must have gone up about 2 feet at least, and slammed against the roof before spilling all over the floor. The 3 of us were literally speechless. Adam was very skeptical about ghosts and had an explanation for everything prior to this, but struggled to explain this. The explanation he's given is the heat from the cooking caused a pressure buildup underneath the coffee pot, which led to air expansion causing it to pop into the air. But I'm not as convinced. Another incident experienced by Adam and Josh. They were both watching TV in the living room when apparently the door swung open and slammed really hard to the point that it damaged the wall. Apparently they tried for quite a while with windows open and other doors creating a breeze, but couldn't quite mimic the strength and force that this door had opened with. Annoyingly, we all got charged with the damage to the wall, and it came out of our deposit. Kyle and Jenny reckon that Adam and Josh made that story up because they damaged the wall themselves play fighting, which they did a lot, and didn't want all the damages just to come out of their deposits. One night, me, Kyle, Jenny, and another girl from a different flat decided to have a movie night where we watched The Room and Birdemic and some other cult classic bad movies. We saw the bathroom light flicker on, and Jenny claimed she saw what looked like a shadow of a person move across the wall into the bathroom. Me and this other girl went into the bathroom and found the light on and the sink running. Jenny was the last to use the bathroom and claimed she turned the sink off. Josh, Kyle, and Jenny apparently did a Ouija board in the kitchen to communicate with whatever spirit was lingering about. They were the most avid about the flat being haunted. Apparently they had a conversation with a spirit about it being someone's guardian or something. Josh also apparently spoke to the on-site security, who claimed that another student had killed themselves in that flat several years earlier. But again, the story from security and the message they claim the Ouija board gave them don't really add up. And myself and Adam were quite skeptical that security would just casually tell that story. And I'm also not so convinced with Ouija boards, having done several in the past, in locations that are supposed to be extremely haunted, but having no response. So I'm a bit of a geek and collect a lot of geeky stuff. I had a collection of all the sonic screwdrivers from Doctor Who, which I kept proudly on display. My 3rd Doctor screwdriver seemingly went missing for weeks, and I assumed it was stolen or hidden by either Josh or Leon, as us 3 were in the middle of a flat prank war. One night, my girlfriend and I were in bed when I heard one of my screwdrivers going off. They make like a whirring sort of sound when the button is pressed. It sounded like it was coming from under the bed, so I looked down under the bed with my torch and saw it, right at the back, making the whirring sound. The second I touched it, the whirring stopped. I thought something was resting on the button, making it make that noise, but with this particular screwdriver, you have to pull down the thing, and it just didn't make sense for that to be happening. The last event that we're all aware of happening, if we don't include things constantly going missing, and Josh claiming the TV turned itself on and off, up and down, whenever he was in the room alone. This was actually me, by the way. I connected my Samsung Peel remote to his TV to prank him, and I think Leon was stealing stuff from people's rooms, explaining things going missing. Another case of me and my girlfriend in my room. She was playing on her Nintendo Switch or DS. I can't quite remember. And I was watching Dragon Ball Z on the TV. We heard a loud, rhythmic, 3-tap knock on the window. The curtains were closed, but the sound of knuckles on glass is quite noticeable. I had turned off my thing and paused for a second. My girlfriend turned to me and said, "Did somebody just knock on our window?" And straight after she said it, we heard the knock again. I immediately opened the window curtains but saw nothing. We're 6 stories up, just to clarify. There was a party going on in the room directly below us, so I wonder if any of them had used a long stick or something and pushed up out of their window as a prank, but they all denied it and told me to ask if it was anyone leaning down from the room above. The room above was empty. I have absolutely no explanation for this one. Neither does my girlfriend, who is a hardcore skeptic. So yeah, that's all the weird stuff that happened in my uni flat. Funnily enough, Leon and another girl that lived there never had any experiences happen to them. They were all centered around myself, Josh, Kyle, Jenny, and Adam. Not sure if that means anything. I wasn't overly convinced of the supernatural prior to living there, but those experiences, as well as a number of stories from my parents, have convinced me to reconsider my beliefs. So I live way out in the thick of it. The place looks like a Bob Ross painting. I have a little cabin with a loft that I sleep in, and an outhouse just a few steps away. Not a bad place, except for the stupid ghost noises that happen nearly every night. So it's pretty cold and the cabin is somewhat new, 2019-ish. So with extreme cold, there's going to be some creaks, but I'm not hearing creaks. I hear footsteps in the snow just outside the windows, despite there being no footsteps in the 10+ inches of snow that's all around my cabin. There's thumping along the walls, even though there isn't any trees that are close enough to touch the cabin. Even if there were, for the whole time I've been here, there hasn't been a wind faster than 5 miles an hour. They like to do their thumping by my heating oil tank, which makes a nice metallic clanging sound. Originally I thought it was someone trying to steal my oil, but again, no footprints other than my own. Sometimes I could hear faint footsteps directly below me while I'm trying to sleep. Ever since I put one of my spare Bibles down there, the ghostly activity has been contained to the outside of the cabin. So at this time I'm pretty used to it, but it's annoying when I hear something banging on the side of the cabin while I'm trying to sleep. Is there a way I could at least get them to help with rent since they won't leave? In all seriousness, I don't really know what to do. I was raised in the bush, so I know that if I hear some weird noises in the woods during the night, that I should mind my own business, and I know that I don't want to get mixed up in ghosts and spirits. So how can I make it clear to them that they are not going to go in the cabin? My CO2 detector is in the clear. I am pretty active. I work full-time, go to church, go to the gym, and I visit my fiancée often. So I don't think it's cabin fever. Someone told me that heating oil tanks just randomly make noises. And yeah, that makes sense. But this isn't an occasional thump. It's a bang, 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 like someone were knocking on the door. When snow slides off the roof, it makes a good thump, but these noises happen all the time. From snowing to not snowing, -30 to 40 degrees, but always during the night. Local history isn't much to go off. I'm still poking around, but from what I can see, this is just mining land, as in there weren't really many natives in the area, and miners just strolled in and started their mining. Simple as still no tracks in the snow other than my own, nothing big enough to make footstep sounds. There were squirrel footprints on the front porch this morning, but other than that, not a thing. There are trees kind of close to the outhouse, but not close enough to bump into it when the wind blows. This experience happened when my wife and I stayed in Banff National Park for a week back in September. We've always paid a visit in this beautiful landscape whenever we visit my folks in Calgary, Alberta. although we didn't think we would have a paranormal experience this time around. We try to do excursions that we haven't done yet every time we make a visit, a mix of touristy things and non-touristy stuff. Near the end of our trip, we were scheduled to visit the cave and basin, which was a 7-minute bus ride from Banff town. We decided to go upon opening so that we can avoid the crowds and have lots of time to do other things on our list that day. A bit of info for those who haven't been to the cave and basin, or even Banff for that matter, is from what we read, a kind of museum where they show how Banff was rediscovered by Canadian railway workers back in 1883. Rediscovered because this national park was, and still is, a sacred land for Indigenous people. It has been like this for centuries before it was rediscovered. We came into the entrance of the tunnel to the cave, where these railway workers were said to have dug through and discovered a large sulfur well. This sacred cave was used by Indigenous people as a place for healing. Going through the tunnel is dark, and its only light source is above the well itself, where the sunlight peeks through. It was quiet and eerie walking through the dark tunnel. I can hear whispers, even if we were the only ones going in. Then something told my wife not to look into the water in the well. She said after that she may not have liked it if she looked down there. We didn't stay too long in the caves as it started feeling claustrophobic, and the smell of sulfur was unbearable. My wife told me what she felt when we came out of it. I told her that I did not see anything, and I looked into the well myself. Little did I know at the time that this creepy experience wouldn't end there. Next, we continued the tour and made our way to the top of the building where the bridge connects the museum to the forest of Sulphur Mountain. As we crossed over, we saw a small cabin that served as lodging for the railway workers back then. We were right above the cave that we were just in about half an hour ago. The cabin was surrounded by a large forest ascending up the mountain, and right when my wife was reading information about this cabin, I felt a dreadful feeling, a feeling I'm familiar with when there's a spirit or entity in the midst. It also felt like there's a number of people watching over us, even if it was just the both of us up there. As I looked from left to right, my eyes were drawn to the tall trees at the far back, and there I saw a dark entity so massive and tall that it stood as tall as the tree beside it. Though I couldn't see its face, I knew it was staring at us, as if guarding the area. It did not feel like a ghost, but a spirit or an entity that felt so old, maybe as old as the forest itself. I felt that we weren't welcome there anymore. I then motioned to my wife that we cut our time there short, and we left with a haste. It was only after we left the grounds that I told my wife what I saw. Seeing an entity like that was understandable, knowing how sacred that place is for Indigenous people. So whenever you get the chance to visit Banff or these national parks, learn the history, respect the land, its people, and the unseen guards. This experience really wigged out my family and I. It was during the time my mother, father, brother, myself, and our dog Goose were all living under the same roof. It was an evening after dinner. Mom was already soaking the dishes. Dad was clearing the table. I was finishing up my plate, and my brother was in the furthest part of the kitchen, playing tug with Goose and her new toy. The rest of us turned to my brother to engage in the game, while Goose frantically jumped around between us, anticipating her next turn. We were all joking and laughing when we noticed right away that something was off. This wholesome family moment quickly took on an entirely different mood. The reflection from the overhead light in the glass door was distorted behind my brother. The glass was warping right before our eyes. It looked as if someone was on the other side pushing in on the door. You could immediately feel the fear sweep across the room, and before my brother could even process what we were looking at, there was a loud and aggressive bang as the glass snapped back to its original state. We all jumped, and my brother nearly pissed himself as he whipped around to investigate what the hell had just happened behind him. The rest of us stood there frozen, even Goose. We exchanged looks with each other as if to say, You just saw that too, right? The room was very still and ominous until my mother says aloud, "Well, that was weird." Then she proceeded to go about tending to the dishes, which encouraged my dad and brother to proceed with their normal as well. That left me standing there in awe, just staring back at the blackness on the other side of the glass door.